We'll wait for Representative Dillard to arrive on the stage as well. This is Representative Kenny Bingham from Lexington, a longtime friend, known him for many years. Thank you for being here, Representative.
Glad to be here.
Representative Dillard, of course, from Greenville County. Representative, thank you for being here. She made the remark that who can fill in for Gilda Cobb Hunter? I would say that you are a terrific substitute for Gilda Cobb Hunter. Not a problem. Let's have a seat. Well, first of all, Kyle, a terrific interactive exercise. I mean, that really is, that's outstanding. No wonder you're one of the most beloved professors at Furman. And Tim, that really is a landmark report, so much information to absorb, and sobering information as well. Representative Bingham, when you look at that information and you see the hard, cold data and you see how many South Carolina citizens are struggling to make it, your first reaction when you see a report like that?
Well, my first reaction is to go after the deadbeat dad who's not taking care of his two kids, the single mom by herself, because you cannot do that in society. I mean, that is a problem in and of itself, and we have way too much of that. But beyond that, I think we have to take it for what it is. I mean, nowhere in our state should minimum wage be the goal in life. It's a reality for a lot of people. There's no question about that. At the same length of time, you know, through education, through hard work, through moving up in whatever corporate or environment you are, that's what you want to see, and people get out of that level, because the realities of it is this: you cannot make it work. I mean, a single mom with two children, and all she makes is minimum wage, and if all she works is 40 hours a week, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. I mean, you can't solve that in and of by itself. I mean, she's either going to have to work more, get outside assistance help brought in. But what we would like to do, and what we really need to do, is create policies that encourage behavior outside of that. Number one, we don't want to have policies that restrict or prohibit people from working. I think that is detrimental to our society. We have to have everyone working. If you're going to receive any benefits, you need to be, and if you're able, now obviously when you have other sectors of the population who are not able to work, that's a different standard. We're not talking about that. But if you are able to work, you need to be working, giving something back, and then we need to try to assist to get them out of that level and to get them into a higher paying job and to a place that they can be self-sustaining. And we can't make it where policies will prohibit that. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, we just saw that, Representative Dillard, that sort of disincentive to earn more, to work more, because your benefits are taken away, and it would not make up for what you would lose. The hard work of fixing those public policy positions is difficult because nobody, to a large extent, very few people are beating down the door of the General Assembly saying, fix this problem. Is that part of the issue?
Well, you know,
No, I don't think yours is on.
Chandra,
Let's go ahead and get her one of the handheld mics. Well, there you go. You're on now. We're good.
we're on now. You know, I feel that people, as people come and talk with us all the time, we're always talking about economic development, how to get our folks working, how to increase skills. But what I have surmised just by listening to today's presentation is that we're not connecting the dots. There is a reality that if you're going to help people, and certainly we do want them making more than minimum wage, but we must start with people where they are. And as a legislature, sometimes we're not starting there and helping people have that safety net so that they can go past that and increase their skills to earn more money. Because there is a reality. We just went through a reality check with our budget today. And so we need to talk about that when we look at our policies that either help or hinder people.
Well, as we go through that exercise, yes, I feel for the single mother, no question. But I also deeply feel for that 7-year-old and that 2-year-old, because what do we know about poverty? If that's the way you are raised,
right,
there is almost a 90% chance or more that that's how you are going to live as an adult. And those two kids, more than likely, are going to require a great amount of social services. Is it hard to get people to recognize that in the General Assembly? I mean, it seems like such an easy concept to understand.
Well, I don't think that my colleagues, some of them recognize that. But, you know, again, it's where you're going to start. And, you know, where you start doesn't mean that's where you need to finish. But we need to be honest about where we are with the data. And that's what I love about the information that was presented. And we, regardless of which party or or where we stand on the issue, the data doesn't lie. And so we need to take that and move from there to say, how are we going to move the needle as we look at other states? I mean, we're only 1 in 5 that don't have a minimum wage. That's information we really need to consider.
That could be one policy, public policy prescription. Another could be the earned income tax credit.
Right. Sure.
That's something that has appeal on both sides of the aisle in many ways. If you're a conservative, you say, I like that because there's incentive to work. I mean, that's one of the things you and I have discussed. South Carolina, not a state that has a state earned income tax credit, but something I know that you've thought long and hard about in the past.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, anything that we can do to incentivize behavior, and we have to look at a cost-benefit analysis for everything that we do, because it should work. The policies where we put our money, there should be a benefit on the other side of that money and it will do that when you work people out of poverty so that they can become employable. A few years back, I think it was around in 2007, I worked with autistic families. And what happens, let me just back up and say this. What happens in the General Assembly is, number one, you have people from all different lifestyles. I'm a civil engineer. Chandra, you work at Furman University. We have many professions all across the state. We have 3,000 bills introduced in a 2-year session at the Statehouse. There is no way any one person or a multitude of people can be subject matter experts on 3,000 bills and 3,000 issues and understand the dynamics of how all of these complex problems work. We just had 2 experts come up here explaining what they've spent a lifetime, I anticipate, in studying on that one aspect. That's one. There are thousands of such issues, and then you try to go make a living once you leave that Statehouse and do your own job. And try to make your living for your wife and your family and your kids. And so it is a conundrum that we all have to at least understand in order to understand how to change that process and how to make it go better moving forward. And to do that, first of all, we have to speak with one voice, and we need data-driven incentives and advice in order to make it work. Several years ago, I was chairing the insurance subcommittee on LCI and had families with autistic kids. And what we found out is that it was showing us the problem that existed. They wanted mandated insurance coverage for what's called ADA therapy for kids with autism. And so they give me all the data, analytical data. So I went and spent a couple of months going through the data, looking at it. And what I did find is this. If your child is diagnosed with autism at a very early age, and if you can get them ADA therapy, which is one-on-one therapy, 40 hours a week for that child and a therapist, 40 hours a week. But if they can get that for about 2 years, by the time that child reaches first grade, that child can be mainstreamed into the public school and can lead a successful, productive life like 70% of those children. So I sit down with pen with paper, did an analytical analysis of what is it going to save the state over the long haul for that child. I come up with it. I went to the House floor. I fought for it, and we got it, not for mandated insurance coverage. We put in the budget the money because what I convinced the House is that the lifetime cost effect of us treating this child right now, we can definitively prove that it's going to be a benefit for the state of South Carolina. That's how you get success, is you have to prove that it makes a difference long term. Same thing with what we're talking about here. If it's earned income tax credit or other initiatives, if we've got issues and problems that's been identified, quite frankly, you don't have people there that are just obstinate and don't want to do it and they want people in poverty. That is absolutely untrue. All the people at the Statehouse really do want to help, or most of the people at the Statehouse really do. There's a few I really question, and some of them's in my party, but nonetheless. But really, they do, but they don't understand.
Right.
It is a complex issue, and hollering or screaming at them is not going to change the tone of the dynamic. It makes them put up a defense mechanism. So how do you do it? You have to work through that process, and you have to work through it logistically, and just like I said we did before. But you can make change happen, but it does, number one, we have to speak with one voice. If you start getting all competing sides, and the person who is not necessarily well educated in that venue is making the decision and determination of how are we going to move this forward. And, but I do think it's very important for our state. It is important that we do raise incomes. We do not want to be known as a state with the lowest incomes. We want to be a state that attracts high-paying jobs, and we're working towards that. And I've got a lot of other things I can tell you about that, but I know that you have to have Congress from time to time.
Let's continue on that theme and talk about economic incentives maybe for corporations. Economic development has gone very well in this state when you think about manufacturing. Just recently last year, Volvo Cars USA deciding to move to South Carolina. heavily laden with incentives for the corporation. There was criticism that perhaps not so much the worker. Would it be too much to ask a company located in South Carolina, yes, we'll build you infrastructure, we'll build you interchanges, we'll build you utilities and sewer and roads, but these are our workers. And when you come here and locate here, you better take care of them by paying them a reasonable wage. Is that too much to ask a corporation when you're making that deal?
Absolutely not. And I know those questions are being asked. And if we take, for example, and I'll just use this because I was very new in my service, but I can walk through our discussion that we had with Boeing. Mm-hmm. And the investment that we made there, it was quite clear that we wanted people in the Charleston and North Charleston areas to be able to take advantage of that. But of course, we have to do our job too, further, not only incentives, but also making sure that people who live here are trained and ready to take advantage of those jobs. So it is a two-part commitment that, yes, if you come, yes, we want, for this investment, we want our people to take advantage of that, but we also must make sure that the workforce is trained to take advantage of those
And we
skills.
can provide that technical training perhaps at a lower cost, maybe government subsidized, for those people in Berkeley County who really can't access a trade school unless there's some help. Is that reasonable?
Absolutely. I mean, whenever we're going to provide incentives, we have to make sure that whatever incentive that we are providing, it is to the benefit of the whole state of South Carolina, and that there's going to be growth and development, and tagging that to not only just high-paying jobs, but also benefits. If you remember, Chandra, whenever we brought Amazon to Lexington County, it was back in 2011. It was a heated divide. They have 2,000 jobs, but their starting wage is somewhere around $17 or $18 an hour, plus full benefits, which was a big thing. In the legislation that we wrote, in order to give them some incentive to come, it was tagged to that number of jobs at an average salary of whatever it was, and full benefits. So you have health care, you have other coverages that are a big deal when you start looking at somebody's total employment package that they have before them. But I think it's vitally important that we do that. And you hit a real interesting point when you talk about Volvo and Boeing and all of the high-tech manufacturing jobs that's come into the state of South Carolina. I remember back when I was elected in 2000, well, in November of 2000, so I've been in the Statehouse for 16 years. We were on the backside of losing all of the manufacturing jobs in the state of South Carolina.
All of the textiles.
All the textile mills were shutting down. And the mantra then was, you know, we're no longer going to be a manufacturing state. We got to look at a more of a higher educated population. We have to invest in our colleges, our universities. And now what we're seeing, and we did that, and we are maybe not to the level we need to, we can talk about that as well, but nonetheless, there was a shift in our manufacturing sector, and all of the textiles mills were shutting down. Now we see a bringing back of manufacturing jobs, but they are a higher level skill job than what we had prior to this. Here's a fact. 41% of the available jobs in the state are high-skill jobs, and high-skill jobs will be defined as a greater than a high school diploma but less than a four-year college institution. So you need more than just high school training, some additional training. That's why you see, and even in this year's budget, all the money put into job training across the state for these high-skill positions. Only 27% of our workforce right now has those qualifications. You see that? 41% of the jobs are the high skill, but only 27% qualify for that.
And
some are overqualified.
It's lower
some
in
are
persistent
underqualified.
poverty counties, too, much
no
lower.
question.
Well, that's what I was going with.
And so we have to build that gap in order to hit those jobs. And when we do, it's going to help the same population that we're talking about right now grow out of that. And that's why we're providing the education and the training. We're to incentivize so that the person who wants to do it, we try to incentivize their behavior to move into those jobs, and we as a state need to be a willing participant to give them a hand up and help them out of the poverty level. And we do it through education, opportunities, training. Earned income tax credit is clearly one of those things that we can look at. We don't need the barriers that were talked about here that on reality and on the surface make no sense. And so we need to try to address some of
Well,
those.
here's a public policy prescription that I see as a 2-for-1. Early childhood education, universal 4K. One, children at 4, I think we can all agree, are ready to learn. 2, it takes care for a lot of people that child care issue. I can put my 4-year-old in public school. They can be there all day. There's quality after-school programs at many of our public schools. What are we doing on that front to address that issue? Because You know, for me as a parent, my kids are older than that, but I have seen just how powerful that is. The earlier they get educated, the better off they are. The better off, in this scenario, the parents are. Where are we with that?
Well, you know, I've seen us over my 8 years gradually move toward in having 4K, and especially in those counties that were a part of the lawsuit. And so that occurred probably 4 years ago, Kenny. But we do need to continue having that discussion about universal 4K, because as you said, the earlier we have that young person, the better off of closing the income gap and having graduation success. We know that we are going through an education reform period right now in our state, and there have been many suggestions, and that is one of them. I think we're coming to that realization about universal 4K, but of course...
Is it possible, Mr. Bingham?
Oh, well, it's not only possible, it's probable, and it's already being implemented. As Chandra said several years ago, if you remember, you hear about the Abbeville lawsuit, or the plaintiff district's lawsuit, as sometimes that's referred to. It was a suit brought over 20 years ago by Abbeville and a number of other plaintiffs' districts against the state of South Carolina for not providing fair education across the state. And they're right. There is great discrepancy. I see this sign, the slogan says, "One South Carolina." And as I was sitting there behind Governor Riley, I'm thinking about to myself, I said, you know, that is an incredible slogan. It's exactly where we need to go to. But if we're really honest with ourselves, sometimes there's 46 South Carolinas because every county is split apart. And sometimes we have 70 plus South Carolinas because every single school district is treated differently. It is not fair. It is not right. And it means that for many of us probably sitting in this rooms that are in very affluent school districts, that means we have to give something up. And that's what it's going to take in order to get to one South Carolina, to be quite honest with you, because you have the haves and you have the have-nots, and there's nothing that those individual school districts necessarily can do about it. Volvo, when it lands in your school district, you just got a huge economic boom. And the state just poured in a bunch of money. Boeing, $750 million to bring in Boeing. And that one school district gets the benefit of that. But everybody across the state of South Carolina paid into that. But if your district isn't lucky enough to have that, your property taxes go up astronomically high. We've got districts in Beaufort and in Charleston with 100 mills, and you've got others in Lexington and parts of Lexington County and other places around the state with close to 400 mills. So if you're a business, are you going to locate in a district with 100 mill tax base or 400 mills where you're going to pay 4 times as much for your same business and industry? It's a disincentive across the state, and we've got to tackle it. But people's oxes start getting gored whenever we talk about it. And a lot of people say, well, no, I won't change, but I want everybody else to change. I don't want change. Well, it doesn't work that way. If we're going to be one South Carolina, then we have to be one in terms of how we tax, how we fund, and how we apply uniformly the education across the state. But we've started making some moves in those directions. We have 4K in most areas across the state, all the poverty areas. What we started doing is building out the areas with the most poverty first, and we're building that up. And that's part of our response to the Abbeville lawsuit. Now, I'll be honest with you. For all of us, I told you I'm an engineer, so I kind of look at facts, figures, and numbers to try to change, and I hope to be open-minded and change my perspective as I see numbers change. When I ran for the school board in 1996, I served 4 years before being in the General Assembly, I had the attitude, if you got a kid and the student doesn't learn, kick him out of the classroom, let him worry about it. And that was just an ignorant thought that I had because I didn't understand the dynamics of what happened. But it did not take long, or many meetings with education folks, to start looking at numbers and realizing that for every student that doesn't graduate high school, you just add a prison cell. Because that is just about where it is at. If you cannot graduate high school, you're not going to get a job. You're not going to get that minimum wage job most of the time.
You pay now as a society,
absolutely.
you pay later.
So once I understood the concept, it's like, okay, now we're going to change and we're going to get alternative schools. So we started an alternative program in order to try to save those kids. But it's a transformative change when you realize that as a conservative approach, it is not to do sometimes what people think is a conservative thing. But you've got to have the facts, the figures, and the numbers to go along with it. The same thing with education. If we do not, we can make the arguments all day long that a parent should have responsibility to train up their child and to get them prepared for first grade. But the reality of it is this, while we can make that argument and in theory talk about it, it's not the case. And we as a society are stuck with a parent who maybe doesn't have the skill set to do that properly. And so for those parents, at-risk students, we back down to 4-year-old kindergarten. We also have other programs from 0 to 3 through First Steps and family partnerships trying to reach out into the homes and address that. And you mentioned something else, Mark, and it's after-school programs. You cannot just leave, as much as it would be nice. A lot of these students do not have a home to go to. Either both parents work or one parent works. There's nobody at home, and that is not a good situation or environment. And so we are funding in the budget this year. We've got a great education budget this year. And I do write the K-12 budget. So
Yeah, he knows that.
but no, seriously, it is because of the work of so many other people, not myself. We just put together what the State Department, EOC, and so many of the other agencies have worked with us on so long and hard. But these after-school programs are a big benefit for these children to go in there. But every single program that we fund, let me tell you this, every single program that we fund is evaluated by the Education Oversight Committee each and every year, and we look at cost-benefit analysis on each and every one. That's not always been done, but it's been done the 6 years that I've been on here. And we have to do that to make sure that our citizens are getting every single bang they can for every dollar they're sending to Columbia for us to distribute back out.
Real quickly, I'll point this to Representative Dillard before we go. I think I misspoke when I said you don't have people beating down the door talking about this issue, because at the risk of bringing up the presidential elections, and I say at the risk, I get it. If you look at the two most energized campaigns on both sides of the aisle, the thing that binds them both are working class people who are very angry, they're mad, and I don't think, having seen both of those rallies in person, that those folks are going to forget about it or go away. Do you agree? And if you're a politician, you know, my advice, free advice, you better take note.
Absolutely. I mean, we just heard that middle class people vote. They're civically engaged. They feel the pressure every day. Those 24% of people that Tim talked about, they get up and they're already doomed. You know, it's real. And so we're hearing those voices on the campaign trail, and it's energizing both of those front-running campaigns. And so, yeah, we need to pay attention.
Finally hearing from those people for the first time, it's a big issue, Kenny.
It is.
You don't even really want to wade there, I guess.
I might as well go ahead. I mean, I've messed up everything else, so why don't I jump in there too? Look, I think we're going to make South Carolina great again, Mark. We're going to win. We're going to win so much that you're going to get tired of winning the state of South Carolina, because here's what we're going to do. I'm going to build a wall across our borders, and North Carolina and Georgia is going to pay for it.
Good. Chandra, Kenny, thank y'all so much for being up here to talk about that in the legislature. Appreciate it.
It is my pleasure always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.